He's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic.
We're ready for another edition of Just Say No. Glad to be back with you. Today we want to cover a little bit. Also, my own American Indian people have suffered great and horrific ethnic cleansing movements upon us. A genocide, in fact. Many Jewish people have forbid us using genocide, but that's actually not true. The Americans were a much earlier genocide than the genocide of Adolf Hitler. And I want to make it clear, I have no sympathies for the Nazis. They were a terrible, terrible group of people that did vicious things to all Jewish people. And I find that as reprehensible as what's happening to the Palestinians today. In fact, I'm shocked that Israelis today think that it's okay to do the same thing that was done to them in Germany to the Palestinian people now. My ideas are that I want to join a new peace movement. I was greatly active back in the days of the Vietnam War, and I was very active during El Salvador and Nicaragua when we were rebelling against, the assassinations going on, the death squads.
Hello and welcome to a special live stream for Sunday, January 19th. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, John Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. After 471 days of Israel's genocide, we can finally say this is day one of the ceasefire. We have an important show for you today. We'll be joined by our contributor Abu Bakr Abed live from Gaza, and we'll analyze the terms of the ceasefire and the next steps as Palestinians in Gaza begin to rebuild and restore after Israel's 15 months of calculated, systematic campaign of destruction. Like many of you, in the past few hours, we've been watching the scenes of celebration across Gaza, the thousands of Palestinians walking step by step back to their homes or in the rubble of their homes in the north and in the south. We've watched the first stage of the captive exchanges. We've seen the heroic civil defense, the paramedics, the doctors, the municipal workers, and the journalists in all their dignity and bravery lift each other up, quite literally, onto the shoulders of their community. And we've seen the fighters of the resistance amongst their people who have endured unimaginable and unrelenting terror at the hands of Israel and the U.S., and who did not surrender, did not concede for 15 months straight. It's been an intense day already, to say the least, and we're all trying to catch our breath and recalibrate ourselves toward processing this brutal Holocaust and anticipating what comes next. People have been celebrating.
The children are heroes. The children were the first ones in the streets, faster than the police, faster than the civil defense. It's always the kids. And shout out to the kids for living through this. And what Abu Bakr said is exactly right. This is an entire generation of children who have seen that they can win, that the entire world can be aimed at this tiny little besieged enclave and can't defeat it. That is going to have reverberations through the future for however long it lasts of the Israeli state, because this is a remarkable moment, and hiding pictures of people celebrating or threatening families having gatherings, none of that makes any difference to the way that this is going to be absorbed by the people that lived through it. They lived through the worst, and they came out on the other end surviving. unified. It's just remarkable. It's been an
And
overwhelming day. I didn't sleep. It's been
and
remarkable to watch.
it truly is. And just on this, Nora had mentioned a point, of course, about Israel trying to ban celebrations in the West Bank. But what's striking me is how much Hamas and the Qassam brigades are in control of the narrative here, because they did that prisoner release in Saraya Square. And then Abu Ubaidah gave his address by video. So it was coordinated. And that was pretty remarkable. And it was announced. So everyone was waiting to watch it. He spoke for 23 minutes. He appeared in his neatly pressed uniform and his, with the keffiyeh wrapped around his face as usual. And his appearance is remarkable. I think the last time he had appeared was on October 7th. So it's been like 3 months, and he'd appeared something like 30 times throughout this war. And John already mentioned some of the key points in his speech, but there were others that I think are just worth highlighting very briefly, which is that he was very specific about the ceasefire. He said some things that I think are very important. He said that this particular agreement would have been possible a year ago, that they were ready to do this agreement a year ago. And that confirms what everyone else is saying. But he says Israel did not want to do it. Instead, Netanyahu and his fascist government insisted on the genocide aimed at expelling our people and causing as much destruction as possible. And he also affirmed their commitment to it, Hamas's commitment, not just Hamas. He spoke on behalf of all the resistance factions. He said, "We affirm our commitment to the ceasefire and our readiness to implement its provisions and conditions in order to stop the fighting." And he said that they were committed to the schedule of prisoner releases and to protect the enemy's prisoners until they're handed over in exchange for our people. But he said that all of this depends on Israel's commitment to the deal, and that any violations by the enemy could endanger either Hamas's ability to carry out the terms of the deal or would endanger the safety of the prisoners. So that was important, because they're setting out here that we are not the ones who are going to spoil this. We're committed to this. We're committed to making it work. And I think the other point that is worth noting is really his acknowledgement of the support that the resistance received from the region around the world. And he mentioned in this order Ansar Allah and the people of Yemen, who of course have done the maritime blockade and been firing the Palestine 2 missiles and the drones from Yemen. Then he mentioned the resistance and the people in Lebanon and their sacrifices, both from their leadership, their soldiers, and their people. Then he mentioned the Islamic Republic of Iran for its continuous support for the resistance and the True Promise operations. He mentioned the Iraqi resistance, and he mentioned the Free People of Jordan and their fighters who crossed the border and aimed their weapons in the right direction. I'm paraphrasing what he said. And then a broader thanks to all the Arab and Muslim people of the world. And he said that Qassam had received millions of messages from around the region, from as far away as Morocco and Indonesia, offering to come to Gaza and fight with the resistance. And then he mentioned all the free peoples of the world who demonstrated in their millions and who continue to do so in rejection of the Zionist genocide and in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So it was really a comprehensive address that addressed multiple audiences. First and foremost, the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza, making the points that John had mentioned, but also this broader global audience. And I think a key takeaway from the events of today is that maybe before October 7th, Israel and its American and European backers thought there was an option to destroy Hamas that they had and that they were holding in their pockets. Now it's clear they don't have that option. Israel did everything to Gaza except use nuclear weapons. And it is very clear they cannot dislodge this resistance. And it appears to be entirely intact, even despite Israel's destruction of Gaza. So the symbolism and the messages today are absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, and he also said that they dismantled the myth of the Israeli military. Not only did Qassam survive the battle, but Israel didn't. Israel was the one who got taken apart on October 7th, proved that it couldn't defend its own population, that required an air bridge that he referred to of weapons shipments from the United States. This was a joint United States-Israeli war with Western backing, diplomatic backing, financial backing. And so it's remarkable. And he also pointed out to the fighters and said that they fought with ingenuity, which is something that we've covered for all these 470 days. And he said that this is an epic battle that will be studied in war colleges for generations to come. And they're not going to be studying Israel's tactics. They're going to be studying the Palestinian resistance.
They may be studying them as what not to do.
What not to
Exactly.
do.
Yeah.
And
Caution
he did,
tales. Yeah.
yeah, and he did also talk about the broader damage to Israel. He talked about the military damage that he said thousands of Israeli soldiers killed and injured, 2,000 Israeli armored vehicles or armored units destroyed or put out of action. But he also talked about the economic damage,
Yeah.
the loss of morale, the political damage, the fact that Israeli leaders and soldiers are now pursued around the world as war criminals. So it also shows a sophisticated understanding of the political and global context and a deep reading of the situation, which you don't see from the Israelis. The Israelis live in their fantasies. They're not making reality-based assessments, which is why I think they failed so badly, because they went in with hubris, with overconfidence, with a sense that we are the greatest army in the region, if not the world. We have the backing of the United States and the world behind us. And that hubris did not serve them well, did not serve them at all, really. So it's the implications of what has happened are profound. And although we knew because of the analysis that we were seeing every week from John, from the videos coming out, and from what people in Gaza were telling us, that the resistance was still fighting. But seeing it is believing it. Seeing is believing. And what we saw today was the confirmation of all of that. And that's why Israeli analysts of all kinds and Israeli ministers and former ministers, the Israeli press has been full today of Israeli big shots saying we've suffered a major strategic defeat. And so one of the fears, I mean, this is sort of maybe another topic. Maybe we want to pause and look at some of the other footage coming out of Gaza, but I want to get into the durability, what we think about the durability of this agreement, because I know that's something a lot of people are concerned about. But I don't know, Nora, Asa, John, you want to jump in on this?
Well, I wanted to get John's thoughts on the vehicles, the military vehicles that Israel left behind after they were completely destroyed or at least disabled by Palestinian resistance. I know we have a short reel of Palestinians coming back to the north and happening upon these vehicles in the field. Tell us about the significance of this, what we're seeing.
So this is these are shots. They're going to find these all over when people return. These are the M113s. These are troop carriers, armored troop carriers from the previous generation. These are like Vietnam era. Um, they're what the Israelis did was brought them back to life by making them robotic, unmanned vehicles, and they would fill them up with explosives and they would drive them and explode them and use them as car bombs. That's how failed they were as a military structure. And that's a D9. That's a Caterpillar. You can put that on the BDS brochure. That's a Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. But you can see there, that's one of those M113s that they blew up. They used them as remotely operated car bombs.
Around Kamal Adwan, that's
They
how
used
they, yeah,
yeah,
Adwan
around the hospitals.
Hospital.
Yeah, and so these kind of things will be left when their other vehicles, when they're more when their tanks were disabled. We saw the footage of them dragging their tanks. They didn't want to leave any trophies behind. They've left these M113s because they were essentially used um, as disposable items. But when you really think about what you're looking at, that this army that's funded and backed by the richest countries in the world uh, is using these vehicles remotely because they don't have the courage to fight in the territory, that they're trying to get back the image that the Qassam brigades took away from them on October 7th. And the way that they can think to do it is to commit a genocide against largely against children, that their military targets are hospitals, and that they leave behind these essentially tank bombs that they've made to blow up neighborhoods. This is a record that will be a stain on Israel, and a stain on the United States, that can never be forgotten. It's shocking, and the happiness of people seeing these. I worry about some of these. I think they need to be careful around these. Like, some of these are essentially unexploded weapons being used to blow up civilian neighborhoods. So if you're listening, be careful of those before you go poking around on them. Those ones looked like they had been emptied out, because the Israelis would use them for other things as well that were demented. Like, they would take anti-tank mines and fill up those M113s with anti-tank mines and robotically drive them so that they could take the anti-tank mines to their fighters so that they could rig up buildings, to destroy buildings more cheaply than through airstrikes. So the ingenuity that the Israelis used were for how to destroy children's homes, while the Palestinian resistance built an indigenous army that fought for 470 days. And we don't know the toll was significant for everybody. Everybody paid a significant price for this battle. But where this takes the Palestinian national movement going forward, this is the kind of thing that you can never take away. These kind of images and feelings of victory and undefeated, that you were not defeated through this entire time. That was one of Israel's goals. Israel's war goals were to return the captives through violence. That failed. Destroy Qassam. That failed. Destroy the Hamas government. That failed. Number 4 was that Gaza would no longer be a threat to Israel. And Abu Bakr spoke to that. That is the biggest fail of all of their goals, because Gaza is a threat to Israel going forward, and the spirit of resistance that this genocide has created is absolutely a threat. That
You meant
hiding
Abu
people on.
Ubaidah.
Well, Abu Bakr said it too about people's feelings
Oh, right. Yeah.
of like of anger and vengeance and loss that yeah, but Abu Bakr and Abu Ubaidah spoke about it, and we're going to hear a lot of people speak about it. We saw it from the children themselves. Some of those really, the epic scenes where the kids coming out of a bombed out building and surviving and saying, we're still here. I think about the one of the old man sitting on his chair saying that the entire world is trying to fight this one tiny little spot on the map and they can't defeat us. Those kind of things that fuels a liberation movement, as much as any weapon or any other thing. That spirit of resistance is strong from this battle.
And speaking of Abu Ubaidah, he addressed a message. We didn't mention this, but I think it's also worth noting to the resistance in the West Bank, encouraging them, and,
Yes.
and specifically to Jenin. So, this is a massive inspiration for other Palestinians, and an example that governments in the region will be afraid of, that are either colluding with Israel or in the pockets of the United States and so on. But it's pretty remarkable to see those armored vehicles, and I'm sure we've only seen a fraction. And that armor plating, all that gear, presumably will go into the Qassam recycling program.
Absolutely, it will. I mean, they in order to prepare for this battle, they sent scuba divers down to World War I sunken British ships to get the shells off the ships. So all of this will be used. At all these munitions, the 70,000 tons of bombs that were dropped on the Gaza Strip are going to be first. They're going to be taken out of people's homes. The resistance themselves will tell people where the booby traps are to protect them, and they will remove the unexploded ordnance as part of their role as a government, and then they will use them for the resistance. And so there's just layer upon layer of failure to this, and the toll was enormous, but the spirit of liberation that comes out of it is something that you just can't put back in the bottle.
Well, there was one goal of some Israelis, such as the right wing ministers, who now seem to, or at least one of them now seems to have left the cabinet, that they had, which was to actually recolonize Gaza, and to add new settlements in the Gaza Strip, return the settlements to the Gaza Strip, and that has not only failed spectacularly, but it didn't get anywhere. And also, remember that the Gaza envelope settlements have not returned. Like, this is something I'm sort of banging on about people to remember, that the settlements that were assaulted on the 7th of October, those populations have still not returned. So in a way, it's not quite a return of territory, but it's certainly a retreat of Israeli settlers.
And of course, will they return after seeing the Qassam fighters marching through Gaza, looking disciplined and ready to go into battle?
You can't picture it. You can't picture it.
Oh, there's a lot of big question marks that the state of Israel faces on this day.
Yeah, there's a feeling, there was really a feeling that a lot of us had on the 7th of October 2023, which was that the map had changed. The map had literally changed, and to me, that change is still intact. It's,
is
it just seems like
brilliant.
we're seeing a real historic shift, which I don't think people are really adjusting to the reality of, and we're starting to see that play out now, really before us.
Yeah.
Well, we should talk a little bit about what comes next,
Yeah.
because a lot of people, are understandably very apprehensive about how durable this agreement is. The first hours were chaotic and fragile. It didn't go into effect at 8:30 local time as people expected, although the people of Gaza weren't going to let continued Israeli bombing spoil their ceasefire. They started celebrating immediately and going home while Israel was still bombing. But in any case, I wanted to, the question is, well, as we discussed in the last live stream on Thursday, the resistance was fundamental to forcing Israel to accept its terms, the same terms that the resistance offered a year ago. But also there was the Trump factor. Donald Trump or his envoy came in and put direct pressure on Israel that the Biden administration had absolutely refused to do. Now, there have been, coming from the Netanyahu camp, this notion, Netanyahu said, or he's trying to spin the agreement, the fact that the first phase has been agreed, but the second phase still has to be negotiated. He's trying to spin it to say that Trump has promised that he will support Israel to go back to war. So Netanyahu is trying to market this as, oh, we're just committed to the first phase and then we can resume the war. And a lot of people are afraid that that's what will happen. And so I want to talk about that, because obviously we don't know what will happen. Anything can happen with Israel. It's an utterly depraved, lawless entity that it has no limits or red lines, and does not respect agreements. That said, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if I had to bet, I would bet that the ceasefire will hold for a couple of reasons. One is that the Israeli army is broken and demoralized. That's a material reality. We talked about that in the last program, reservists not showing up, probably tens of thousands of serious injuries. The full numbers are not known. So they're not ready to go back to war. Thousands of armored vehicles destroyed and so on. What would they do that they haven't already tried? It's not like they have a plan to defeat the resistance. If they did, why didn't they do it? So what are they going to go back and do? More of the same. I think that the internal political dynamics in Israel are now going to start to move against a return to the war, because people are going to start counting the cost, and they're going to start coming to terms with the scale of the failure on October 7th and on every single day since October 7th. And as of recently, the polls in Israel, remember, up until very recently, the polls were saying that the Israelis supported the genocide fully, and that they supported only a temporary deal to get the hostages out and then go back to the war. Now the polls are saying that a majority just want an end to the war. They want a deal that will end the war. And that's also explicable by the fact that the economy is a disaster. We talked about that with Shir Hever last week on Thursday, about divestment, about brain drain, about Israel's sinking credit rating, the fact that this war has cost billions of dollars, and it's not a given anymore that the US Congress is just going to vote for 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion package after package for Israel. And I think also the international dynamics are against this. I think that, Israel had a lot of support from the West on the basis that they could pull this off. Go in, take the gloves off, destroy Hamas once and for all, solve this problem for us. And Israel utterly failed. So are they going to back Israel to do that a second time? I'm not so sure. Some of them might. Keir Starmer probably would. He seems to be just like an utterly unhinged fanatic. But the question is, would Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, as we always said, Trump is a wild card. He's not ideologically tied one way or the other when it comes to Israel. He is tied to money, he's tied to his own reputation, he's tied to capital. But the Biden administration was ideologically committed to this Holocaust, to this genocide, to ramping up violence against children in Palestine. And it remains to be seen what comes next. But yeah, I mean, Israel, I don't see how it can recover from this reputationally, militarily, economically. So it's, we're going to be watching it very closely. We're going to be watching the next steps.
And there is just, I think, worth pointing out this really fascinating story that published by NBC with comments from an official. They're saying an official of the Trump transition team, right. Which I found really fascinating. I think worth taking note of. And the headline, we can show it, is Trump's Middle East envoy is considering a visit to the Gaza Strip amid ceasefire deal. And they're talking about Steve Witkoff, who is the one who went and arm twisted and demanded that Netanyahu come down to his office on Shabbat and then told him, you're going to sign the deal. And Netanyahu signed the deal. And it says that Witkoff is considering a visit to the war-torn Gaza Strip as part of his efforts to keep a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas on track, according to a transition official with direct knowledge of the ceasefire process. And it says that, underscoring just how fragile the president-elect's team believes the ceasefire deal that's set to go into effect on Sunday is, Witkoff also plans to be a near constant presence in the region over the coming weeks and months to troubleshoot flare-ups on the ground that he believes could unravel the agreement. So the next weeks and months. So that suggests that they do have a long-term commitment to the agreement. And then it says, there's a quote from this official, you have to be right on top of it, ready to snuff out a problem if it happens, the official said. And then this is really interesting because they say they're worried about some incident that could spark, an unraveling of the deal. And here, this fascinating quote from this transition official. Remember, there's a lot of people, radicals, fanatics, not just from the Hamas side, from the right wing of the Israeli side, who are absolutely incentivized to blow this whole deal up, the transition official said. So that's fascinating. It sounds like the Trump team knows that it is Israel that is just as likely, if not the most likely, to try to break up this deal. And they're signaling, we know that. We know what your game is. And then it says that the official says, if we don't help the Gazans, if we don't make their life better, if we don't give them a sense of hope, there's going to be a rebellion, the transition official said. I mean, that suggests some understanding that you can't just constantly beat people down and demonize them as terrorists and as subhumans and hope for any different result. So that's, again, interesting, possibly hopeful, but there is this rather worrying next paragraph, which I think should raise a lot of eyebrows. It says, the question of how to rebuild Gaza remains, as well as where some 2 million Palestinians can be relocated in the meantime. Indonesia, for instance, is among the locations under discussion for where some of them could go, the transition official said. Even the question of whether Gazans would be willing to relocate is up in the air. Well, obviously, Gazans are not willing to relocate. And that's just, absolutely bizarre. But maybe, if Witkoff goes to Gaza and sees the reality, they will come up with a more reality-based approach to the reconstruction. Nonetheless, obviously take everything with a pinch of salt, but I thought this article was interesting for showing that this wasn't, at least the Trump team is signaling, this wasn't just about getting day one photo op of hostages being released and Trump getting a big win, that there does seem to be some level of long-term commitment to making this agreement work. And given that Trump was ready to pressure Israel to sign it in the first place, that suggests to me that they may well be willing to pressure Israel to adhere to it. And Israel at this point, presumably, I mean, John might know better than me, when you do a genocide for 15 months and when you go to war against Hezbollah and lose, you need to replace your arsenal. When you've lost 2,000 armored vehicles, you need to replace them, and that's very expensive. And I don't know what stage they are in terms of being able to replace all that stuff. And they're totally dependent on the United States. So there is leverage there that it seems to me Trump is more likely to use than Biden has been. Again, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but there are signals here that suggest that we can't necessarily take for granted what's going to happen one way or the other. And I just wanted to point that out.
And it's important to note, too, that Qassam holds the Israeli soldiers. So there's the next phase. If Israel is going to abandon their soldiers, there's a significant cost for that too that isn't measured in dollars and cents or armored vehicles, and so these are very consequential decisions that Israel's facing right now. And like we said, there's a lot of question marks throughout their society. Shir talked about it on the show last week as well. There's a lot of questions to be answered that are very unclear for the Israelis. And one of the ways that this deal is written is that the phase one can be extended. The negotiations for phase two begin on, I think, day 22. And if there's not an agreement, that the phase one, the ceasefire component, can extend. And I think that's where the U.S. pressure will be applied to that period, I think. And so even if we don't have a lot of faith in the Americans after their entire imperial history, it might be possible to see an extension of that period. It's just
And there's a really sorry, go ahead.
Those quotes from this anonymous administration official, apart from this strange one about Indonesia, they really remind me what Trump said. He said this quote that made headlines about if there wasn't a ceasefire deal or a hostage deal, as he called it, before his inauguration, there would be hell to pay. And everyone took that as him threatening Hamas, which, I think it probably was. But then he also said it again and said, it won't be good for the Palestinians. It won't be good for anyone, frankly. And that was really just an open diplomatic threat to Israel. Whether he'll carry through on that is another thing. But I can't think of a precedent of that, to be honest, really.
Yeah. And I just can't, I think there's a very easy and durable, solution for, where to put 2 million Palestinians in Gaza while Gaza is being reconstructed. It's about 20 kilometers away, right? People from their ancestral homelands who have been waiting for 76 years to return as equal citizens, as indigenous people of that historic land of Palestine. It would be very easy. People would be very thrilled. Abu Bakr was talking about his ancestral village, which is very, very close to the Gaza Strip. And, that is the ultimate goal. That's the goal that Israel doesn't want anyone to think about. But that is the inevitable solution. That is the inevitability of this entire 80-year colonial project. It is going, just as you said, the resistance fighters are going to have a victory parade after this is over. The people will return to their villages hopefully in our lifetimes and in theirs.
Maybe they should be rehoused in Kfar Aza and
Yeah, that's where
they're empty anyway.
That's right. That's right.
And that's important because obviously we're focusing on Gaza, but Gaza is part of Palestine, and the focus can't just be on Gaza as if the solution is entirely within Gaza.
Yeah.
This is the momentum has to be kept towards the liberation of Palestine, not necessarily, through whatever means can be available. So if there are political means to end this genocidal regime, the way the South African apartheid regime was ended through negotiations, everyone would prefer that. Yeah. What we've seen is what October 7th proved is the impossibility of ending the Palestinian resistance. And I really think that's not an exaggeration, because the Israelis had this idea that one day we may have to go into Gaza. It will be very difficult and very bloody, but we will topple the Hamas regime. The idea was it would be costly, but there's no doubt we can do it.
He said for future generations, if you remember, he said we're going to erase Hamas and the idea of them for future generations. And that is a spectacular fail, because this movement, this liberation movement, is going to go down in history. You couldn't have done a worse job of attaining that goal, because it's remarkable. It's remarkable.
People like winners, and across the region, the scenes today, the scenes that were seen on Al Jazeera, watched by tens of millions of people on other channels, were the scenes of winners, of people feeling that they've won. It's not us saying to people in Gaza, "You won," and people in Gaza saying, "Oh, look at our misery. How could you say this is a victory?" No, it's people in Gaza saying, we won, not one in the sense that we overthrew Israel and ended Israel and returned to our homes, but we survived and prevailed over the empire, over the arsenal of the United States, airlifted 24/7. And that's not a small thing. That is not a small thing, because Israel was not fighting alone. It was fighting with the United States, with Britain, with Keir Starmer's Labour Party spy planes flying over Gaza, collecting intelligence for Israel, with the Democratic Party aircraft carriers trying to fend off the missiles from the Houthis or whatever. I'm saying that facetiously, but these are supposedly the progressive parties in these societies that were fully committed to this genocide, and yet they could not defeat tiny Gaza. They couldn't defeat Yemen. They haven't defeated Hezbollah. They haven't defeated Iran. There is a lot of hubris about that, and I think that that's another factor here that militates against any quick resumption of the war in the form we saw it, which is that Iran held off from True Promise 3, probably because they saw the way this was going and they wanted the ceasefire to take place. Iran has always said, that's our priority. That's our priority. But if the war goes back, and Israel starts bombing Gaza again and carrying out massacres of 70, 80, 100 people a day, I think there's a very high chance that Iran will unleash 1,000 missiles. I think that's very likely to happen. and people have underestimated them in the past, but I don't think it was a coincidence that just a few days ago they released this video of one of their underground missile cities that had never been seen before. There was a message in that to say, don't think we've forgotten about you. And I think also week after week of Israelis coming home when the only thing Israelis have seen for 15 months is reports of Israelis being killed in Gaza. Week after week of Israelis coming home and being joyously reunited with their families is going to make it very difficult for Israel to say, well, we're going to condemn the rest of them to death now and start bombing Gaza. So,
yeah, especially, you know, if it all holds and week by week there's more and more of them being released, which Israeli leader is going to be able to just overtopple all that, you know, to stop that from happening?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to make any definitive predictions, like you said, but it's really hard. It's really hard to me. It's really hard to see them going back to this this genocide in this form, at least.
Well, we I think we about covered it for today. I know we're all exhausted. We're our hearts are full. Our minds are going 10 million miles an hour, and you know, I think I am just waiting to see what happens next. I know that the next 6 days, especially, will be very critical. We are going to come back on Thursday because we have our regular live stream now on Thursday, usual time. And we're going to keep covering
very
this.
interesting guest.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to give it away, but it's going to be great. Yeah, just please continue to go to the Electronic Intifada, our website. We have some incredible new features by our writers in Gaza. There's, our friend Sam Husseini being dragged away by cops at the U.S. State Department press briefing a few days ago. Check it out. All of our coverage is there. Sign up for our email list, subscribe to our YouTube channel, donate if you can and have the means. And we'll see you on Thursday. And thank you, as always, to Tamara Nassar. We revoke your red card, of course. And thank you for the direction and production at this last minute for this live stream. And on behalf of myself, Ali, John, and Asa, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you Thursday.
Services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the ongoing war in Gaza, infant twins Wissam and Naeem Abu Wanza were also among the ones who were buried. Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crew conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah.
Born into war, the only tiny joy in their life right now. Not one, but two newborn babies, both of them ill. The family homeless in a cold, damp room in Han Yunis. And the gnawing fear. How do you save your children from the war, hunger and disease?
It was a difficult birth. I needed anesthetics and medicine that the hospital didn't have because of the war. The conditions are difficult and we are sitting on blankets. There are no vaccination. We need nappies, milk and clothes. And my husband isn't working.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
I sleep with 4 children on this bedding. It's not enough to protect you from the floor. The weather is cold and the wind comes in. It's hard for the children. Chest infections, diarrhea. They were all ill in the last 2 months.
Danger too in the other Palestinian territory. This is the West Bank village of Hussan. The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank, making it the deadliest year on record for Palestinians. Israel says it's targeting militants, but Palestinians say it's civilians who are being killed.
The army raids the area every day. They climb the wall and search cars and they fire shots. They occupy our land and it's natural to resist them. We don't have weapons but stones. They respond to stones with snipers. They are afraid of stones.
These women are afraid for the future of their sons. The West Bank is boiling from Israeli raids, arrests and road closures. It's the same in Bethlehem, where Christmas has been cancelled and Christians rally to support Gaza.
And it's not just economic life that's been affected. Travel for Palestinians around the West Bank has been severely limited since October the 7th.
But you have to remain close to your home. I cannot neither go right nor left. Checkpoints are suffocating us.
The West Bank is divided into 3 areas, A, B and C. A is run exclusively by the Palestinian Authority. Israelis are banned from entering. B is jointly administered, and C is run by Israel, with the IDF responsible for security. Palestinian areas are split into small pockets, with Israeli roads often dividing them. Now, under the previous government of Naftali Bennett, the expansion of roads here in the West Bank was put on hold, but that has been completely reversed by Benjamin Netanyahu. That decision was welcomed by many in the Israeli settler movement. More than 500,000 live in the West Bank. The UN and many countries say all settlements are illegal and an obstacle to peace. The people that live here in Efrat are separated from their nearest Arab neighbours by just a couple of 100 metres, a few farmsteads and a couple of fences. The last month has seen a massive Israeli security operation in the West Bank. They have arrested more than 1,400 Palestinians. They claim most were connected to Hamas. Just today, the Palestinian Authority said 18 people had been killed, taking the total to 170 in the last month. It has been met with Palestinian protest, both at the security crackdown and the increasing death toll from Israel's war in Gaza. Today in Bethlehem, there was a general strike. This is a more peaceful and prosperous part of the West Bank, but there are areas where there have been direct conflict between communities. In particular, some groups of settlers have been accused of attacking Palestinians. Here, one shoots a man in his leg. Oded Ravivi is Efrat's long-serving mayor. He says those settlers are an extremist fringe. For years, the call has been for a two-state solution, an independent Palestinian nation in the West Bank and Gaza, with East Jerusalem as its capital. But that would require sacrifices from places like Efrat that they will be unwilling to make, and wider Israeli society unlikely to enforce. As he finishes his day's work, Ahmed's concerns are more simple.
Peace and security. To come and go with our cars, to see our children, to see peace, to live in our country without problems. We are looking to be able to feed our children, that's all.
Even before the events of the 7th of October, the West Bank was seeing a rise in violence. Two communities who both feel a connection to this land. Agreement was never going to be easy. It now seems further away than ever.
This madness, we really must push forward, and we must protect our young people who are standing up against this madness.
The Israeli military said calls for a ceasefire in Gaza are echoing across the globe. Hands off Rafah rallies are being held in cities worldwide. Demonstrators in Washington, D.C. called on the U.S. to end its military aid to Israel and push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The immediate focus is the Rafah city, where Israel has warned that it will launch a ground offensive in the coming few days.
Now, days after a massacre by Israeli troops in Gaza City triggered fears of complicating ceasefire negotiations, Cairo is hosting a critical round of talks between the two sides.
And as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn territory has surpassed 30,000. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the ongoing war in Gaza, infant twins Wissam and Naeem Abu Wanza were also among the ones who were buried. Many are still trapped under the rubble of ruins in Gaza's southernmost city. Palestinian Civil Defense released a video showing crew conducting rescue operations after airstrikes on Rafah.
However, that condition hangs in the balance, as Israeli counterparts are yet to come to the table for discussions. Let's remind you, Hamas's demands as part of the ceasefire negotiations include complete withdrawal of Israel's military from Gaza and a boost to humanitarian aid in the war-ravaged enclave. Now, according to a senior Hamas leader, the group has demanded the entry of at least 400 to 500 trucks into Gaza per day, carrying food, medicine, or even fuel.
And as we speak, the sheer number of dead bodies continue to mount in Gaza. The death toll in the war-torn enclave has surpassed 30,000. In Rafah, funeral services for those who lost their lives took place on Sunday. 14 people were killed by an airstrike that flattened their homes in the waning hours of Saturday. Born a few weeks into the Gaza war, infant twins Wissam and Naeem Abu Wanza were also among the ones who were buried.
My son is still under the rubble. My brother-in-law was martyred along with his 2 children. He waited for them for 16 years. His wife had fertilization, IVF more than once. They died.
The immediate focus is the Rafah city, where Israel has warned that it will launch a ground offensive in the coming few days. Where the United Nations says over 500,000 people are one step away from famine conditions. However,
Okay, and thank you for joining me. Have a great evening of Just Say No. Thank you.